What's up, everybody out there in Codex land? We are here with another amazing interview with another amazing comic creator. Today, I've got with me this man, Phil Hester, fantastic artist. You know him, you love him from DC, from Marvel, from tons of independent stuff. So, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan.
Oh, always. Definitely a fan. That's why I reached out to you through. I can't call it X.
I can't either. It'll always be Twitter to me.
And it'd be all Twitter. So I'll throw this up at first for everyone. If you want to find them on Twitter, or X, whatever. It's there. Phil Hester. He's also on Blue Sky. Also, just search for Phil Hester. And to show you what a superstar he is, he has his own fan page on Facebook. It was dedicated to him.
That's run by my good friend Austin Hamblin, and I just can't stand to be on Facebook, so he took the bullet and he runs that for me. But he tries to post artwork and news, and if you absolutely need to get a hold of me, he'll forward messages.
Okay, that's good to know for everyone out there. So let's jump right into it. The first thing I always ask anybody I talk to is, since you are a professional in comics, what was it that first got you interested in comics?
Well, I think like probably 99% of the people who are going to answer this question, I started as a fan. Mm-hmm. So I started as a comic book reader as a child, and I always had an aptitude for writing and drawing, and I got positive feedback for that when I was in school. And so I just kept pursuing that. And even though I went to a super, super small school, a graduating class of 36 kids.
Wow.
I still found a couple of other guys in that school that were into comics like I was, and they could write or draw. And so we sort of formed our own little like amateur comic book company, and we started making comics, like mini comics for ourselves and our classmates. And that was like really good training for me. And I kept going at that. And then when I went to college, there was a bigger pool of people that were into comics, and we all made comics together too. So while I was still in college, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles dropped as a comic book. And then overnight, there were a bunch of small publishers trying to replicate that phenomenon, and they all needed people. They all needed talent. And I was definitely not ready to be working in comics, but there were a bunch of small publishers that needed talent at about my level. So I started working in comics between my sophomore and junior year of college, and then sort of slowly climbed up that indie ladder to Marvel and DC.
So these comics that you would, make with your friends and put out in high school and college, do you still have any of those?
Oh, yeah. We sort of, like when we all graduated and went our separate ways, like I kept the humor books, and one other friend kept all that, like superhero books, and then another friend kept the horror books. So we were so serious. We like had different, all different genres, and we kept each other to deadlines. It was really, even though we were total amateurs, like quality wise, it helped us build professional habits for, when we actually did get into that sort of world. So it was great training. On top of just being fun, it was really good training.
Well, let that be a lesson to everyone out there watching this. If there's someone in your high school, your college, whoever that is making their own comics and just and giving them out, hold on to them, because you never know when they turn out to be the superstar comic artists of the future.
It'll be blackmail material.
So what when you got into comics, you talked about Ninja Turtles, that opened up like the big creator boom for the indie stuff. But when you first got interested in comics, what characters or what kind of books were you reading?
Oh, I was like a voracious comic book reader. Like when I was super young, I was really into Spider-Man. Spider-Man was my top guy.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how old I was when I was lucky that I have a a set of uncles that are just barely older than I am, just like between 2 and 8 years older than I am.
Oh, okay.
And I got to hang out at their sort of their like they had like a hangout in the attic of my grandma's house, and I would go up there, and they'd have hot rod magazines, a few hidden girly magazines, but more importantly, they had the Ween and Wrights and Swamp Thing run.
Oh, nice.
And I saw those, and I was like, I'd rather look at those in the girly magazines. Like that comic really spoke to me because it was unlike anything else. It was darker, and it was weirder, and it was a little grotesque. And I was drawn to that sort of kind of underbelly of comics that I hadn't seen before. And that sort of pulled me toward like the kind of outsider, still superheroes more or less, but sort of the outsider superheroes like Ragman, or Black Hawk, or just anything that was like outside of the norm, like really like tripped my trigger. So on top of still reading, I'd still read Batman, I'd still read Superman, I'd still read X-Men. But then when I saw something that was a little bit off, like when Doom Patrol guest starred in Teen Titans when I was a kid, that like set me off. Like I had to learn everything about the Doom Patrol, So I was drawn to that sort of weirder stuff, and that sort of played out in my own career. Like I guess I'm still a mainstream superhero comic book artist, but my style's a little bit offbeat, and I find my way onto titles that are a little bit weirder, and where my talent sort of fits. So yeah, I would, like I said, like everybody, I love Spider-Man. Love Marvel Team Up was my favorite book. But I saw that stuff that was a little bit like one notch one way or the other. Like when I saw Frank Miller's Daredevil when I was like 12, 13, I was like, that's the kind of comics I want to make. I want to make comics like this that are like really intense, really high contrast, really about storytelling over flash. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Like it really, like I'm on sort of an inexhaustible quest to find new comics. Like even today, when I see a new comic that's like exciting and interesting to me, it's like I'm that 12-year-old in my uncle's like hangout again.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny you mentioned Swamp Thing. The Ween and Wrights and stuff. One of our guys at the station here, Uncle Gary, he is a huge fan of that. Wrightson is his favorite artist. Swamp Thing #9 is his favorite cover. I think at this point he has around 20 copies of it or so. He's got an autographed one. He's got where they do the proofs where they send it to the publisher and they sign of it. He's got the proof for the cover of Swamp Thing 9.
Oh, that's cool.
That they had sent that to DC to to sign off on. That's how much he loves that cover.
Yeah, no, I'm so into that run. I own a page from it. I own like 4 different roughs that Wrightson did. He did really detailed layouts before he penciled. So yeah, I was so excited to actually get to meet Bernie while I was drawing Swamp Thing, which was that's kind of like a head trip moment, you know.
Wow, that's crazy. So you mentioned all the indie publishers that are trying to duplicate Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that's how you start out for like Capital and Now and Caliber and Dark Horse and all these indie companies. What was it like working for them? You said you weren't ready, so what was it like working for them and growing, as an artist?
I wasn't ready, but I didn't care. Like when you're like 19, 20, you just want to be there. And I felt like I was on top of the world. I don't think I was producing anything worthwhile, but I was employed in comics, which felt like I had made it. I was at the mountaintop.
Yeah.
But I was always like kind of when I was in high school, our tiny little school library had a copy of Jim Steranko's History of Comics. And for people that have never seen that or heard about it, it was a 2-volume set of heavily illustrated history of the golden age of comics that Jim Steranko wrote. And it really romanticizes the golden age. And it really romanticizes like the life of a comic book artist and creator. And I read the covers off those things. Literally, I read the covers off them. And they were never in the library. They were either in my locker or my friend's locker because we just we check them out on a loop. And it filled me with this this really romantic idea of what it was like to be a comic book artist, and how I should always be trying to improve my skills, and I trying to be really objective about my own talent. I don't think I'm that talented, especially compared to other comic book artists. But I study and I work. I have goals, and so like part of those goals is to be a good storyteller, and I've always been working toward that. So even in those early faltering steps, those first jobs that I had that are pretty unremarkable, I'm still trying to learn to be a good storyteller. And I think all those lessons that I learned in those, those first couple hundred pages of mediocre comic art I produced, I couldn't have become a better artist without them.
Yeah.
It was important to do that.
So who were you mentioned Bernie and some others. Who do you look at as your influences that helped you develop your style?
Yeah, there's of course the big ones. Almost everybody will say Jack Kirby. That's my age, because that's sort of like he was sort of like the whole biosphere of comics when I was a kid. Like Kirby's creations were everywhere. Kirby's style was everywhere, and he was sort of inescapable. And sort of the dynamism of American comics is born from his style. The forced perspective, the over the top action, the crazy larger than life poses of the characters, that all springs from Jack. And so it's kind of inescapable. You can't I don't think you can be a superhero artist and not be influenced by Jack Kirby. But like all kids, I was really into John Byrne, really into Frank Miller, really into Bernie, like we said. And then sort of the one out of left field is that I'm a big fan of Joe Staton.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, he was drawing a book called E-Man, which was just like it was sort of like the purest, most innocent, like lively comic. And so all these people that I was seeing at that age were all just kind of being thrown into a hopper. And I was like chewing up what I could digest and like incorporating into my style. So it's tough for me to name influences because there are people that I sought out to be like Frank. I sought out to be like Frank.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to be like Alex Toth. I tried to be like all the EC artists, especially Kurtzman and Kriegstein and Jack Davis. Tried to be like those guys. But then also there's the stuff that like you're not necessarily trying to be like, but if it's part of your diet, you're gonna draw like that. So like I never set out to draw like Michael Golden, but I love Michael Golden, and like that stuff kind of sifted into your brain. So there's subconscious influences and conscious ones, and I would say like it's almost easier for you to like throw out an artist name and I'll tell you what I got from them, than for me to go down that list and like if you ask me to go down the list, I don't get to Don Newton until like hour 2 of this conversation. But if you say, hey, what did you learn from Don Newton? I would know immediately. I would learn about like the grace of the figure, like how to make long, lithe figures that really live on the page, how to make really beautiful, like youthful figures. Everybody, I try to grab something from everybody I look at. And I feel like I became a mature artist when I started to learn to take lessons from artists I didn't particularly care for. So like if I was looking at somebody that I previously thought was boring when I was a kid, I can look at him now and say, oh yeah, that's what that artist was doing so much better than I could even dream about doing.
Yeah.
I just didn't get it because I was a dumb kid. So hopefully I'm still trying to absorb something from everything I look at now. And I hope that never stops. If that stops, I feel like I'm like dead in the water as an artist.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I draw some too, though clearly not quite on your level. But I do that. When I started drawing, I started looking at the comics I was reading in a completely new light. It's not just looking. I'm like, oh, that's a cool drawing, but then you're starting to focus on, all right, how does the page laid out? Right. How is the panel done? You start focusing more on the background and the details in the background and all that kind of stuff. And it's it just opens your eyes to a whole lot of new things.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what separates. There are a lot of people that are like really talented artists and they imitate like the comics they grew up looking at or that the artists they really enjoyed, but they only get the surface from it. And then when it comes time to like really, like put the rubber to the road and make a comic, you realize there's so much more to it than like, oh, I love the way this guy puts the gleam on Iron Man's armor.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's fun. That's what turned me on too. But when you look at like what's special about Gil Kane, it's not just how he drew these really athletic figures. It's that all his characters lived in an authentic 3D space. Like the backgrounds are all credible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that like, if you're really dedicated to this craft and you really are influenced by those artists, you'll start to pick up those non-flashy things. And that's how you know you're on the right track and you might make it someday.
Yeah. And it's not just about, oh, I drew this really cool looking pinup. Like a ton of people do that, but you have to be a good storyteller.
Yeah. That's the hardest skill to teach in comics, I think, because a lot of it is instinctual. A lot of it is just like, there are certain principles about like how to communicate and how to break down a page in such a manner that it's clear to people. But then there's also some things you do just because they're instinct or just because you want to try something new and see if you can push things a little bit. And to me, that's where the really exciting stuff happens. The stuff that's almost inexplicable or unteachable. That's the place where I like to live and have fun.
Yeah. So you did all this, all these books for a couple years for these indies publishers, and then your first work at the big two, if I'm not mistaken, is the backup story in Namor the Submariner annual #1. So how did you get that gig of doing this backup story after a few years of doing indie stuff?
So all the time I was working on indie books, I was still preparing samples for Marvel and DC.
Mm-hmm.
And I would regularly go to a small convention in Kansas City. Well, it looks small now. At the time, it didn't feel small,
Yeah.
But it was a small convention in Kansas City that later sort of became Planet Comic-Con, which is a huge, huge show now.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew Marvel editors would be there. So I prepared Guardians of the Galaxy sample. And this is the old Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah. When they announced the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I was real happy. And then when they showed the characters, I'm like, who are they?
Yeah, no, this is like, the Vance Astro and Charlie 20, the old ones.
Yeah, Martin X and Starhawk. And
right. And so I worked up a sample of them, and I had the Guardians entering a derelict spaceship. And there's a reason I remember this. And the background of the spaceship was just a direct swipe from a Wally Wood EC science fiction comic. Like Wally Wood's famous for doing these really intricate, high contrast drawings of like spaceship interiors that look like working, like they could be, it was almost like Star Wars before Star Wars. It looked like working sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I swiped one of those and put it in the background. And the editor, it was Terry Kavanaugh, saw that. And instead of busting me and saying, "Hey, you're swiping," he saw that I was swiping good stuff. He's like, "Oh, this kid gets it. He's swiping from Wally Wood, not Todd McFarlane."
If you're gonna steal from the
best. And so he gave me a script on the spot at the con, and I had another old artist came up to me afterwards and said, "I've never seen that happen. I've never seen somebody get a gig at a show." But it happened twice that week, and another friend of mine, Clark Hawbaker, got a gig that way too from the same editor. So, but yeah, that's how I started. I think it was 23 maybe, but it was really exciting, and it was a blast. Yeah, I felt like my dream was coming true.
Yeah, and then not long after that, you got the gig at DC where you were doing Swamp Thing, and you talked about what a fan of Swamp Thing you were with the Ween and rights and stuff, and I'm going to presume that you kept up with the character.
Oh yeah,
so it was from issue 140 to all pretty much, other than a few issues here or there, you were the regular artist until the end of the book. So what was it like working on that character that you had grown up as a fan of, and now you're like, hey, now you're the regular artist on here for the next couple of
Yeah,
years.
it was sort of it was very surreal because it's sort of like growing up the fan of a baseball team and then getting drafted by that team,
Yeah.
and then it's sort of like you're like, I don't know if I'm qualified to be here, but I don't care. 'Cause
I'm gonna enjoy it until they find me out.
exactly. And that's the feeling I had because I felt like I probably wasn't ready for that gig. But I was just so excited to be working with Mark Miller and Kim DeMulder, and especially to be working with Titania Wood, who had been coloring Swamp Thing from issue 1. She'd been
Wow.
coloring from Bernie's first issue. So she'd been there forever. And it was sort of like this. I felt like I was part of that legacy now because I was there working with her. But yeah, it was a surreal moment, but it was also super exciting because I was working on this character that I loved so much and cared about so much, and actually like left a mark on that character. I mean, DC just put out a big omnibus of the run Mark and I had, and I thought that would be like kind of a forgotten run, but like it meant something to people that were reading Swamp Thing at the time, and it was really exciting to be a part of that. So I had self-doubts. I always have self-doubt about my work, but it was overcome by enthusiasm. Like I wanted to be there so much that I didn't have time to second guess myself. I just had to work, and I'm so glad I got that gig. And Stuart Moore, the editor of that comic book, really changed my life when he. I think I've told this story before, but I tried out for that book earlier that year and didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to the drawing. I literally went back to the drawing board, and I was so like, I was down for about a week that I didn't make the cut. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do another set. I'm going to do another set of samples of Swamp Thing and send them in. And I did it, and I think I did better. And it was like the right place, right time, that the artist who had beat me out for the gig couldn't go on with the job. And my samples came in, and Stuart was like, all right, let's give this kid another shot. And that's how I wound up on the book.
That's awesome. And you talk about being, a fan of Bernie. Did you kind of look back at any of his stuff and use that as an influence in what you were working on with it?
Oh, for sure. Because so I'm a fan of Swamp Thing through almost every version of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I love the Weenan Wrightson run. I have that run almost memorized.
Yeah.
But I also loved the Pasco Tom Yates run that came after that, and then of course the Moore, Bissett, and Toddleben run.
Yeah.
And then the Rick Veitch run. So like all of that was like part of my DNA. But Swamp Thing had changed visually, because of Bissett and Toddleben largely, the way they drew him. And when Mark and I came back on, we really wanted to re-emphasize that it was a horror comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought the best way to do that was to make Swamp Thing more of a monster.
Yeah.
And make him mucky. And to me, that meant going back to, no pun intended, well, pun intended, I guess, back to the roots of Swamp Thing, and like make him this muck monster instead of like a forest god. And that meant drawing him a little bit more like Bernie. But although I think my Swamp Thing might be second only to Kelly Jones in hulkishness. We tried to make him a monster. But yeah, I definitely look back on that Bernie stuff. And like I said earlier in the interview, I got to meet Bernie during that run while I was working on the character, and he couldn't have been more gracious and welcoming. And it was really a head spinning moment, but it was really cool.
That's amazing. It's amazing to meet the guy who created the character that you're working on the book that you grew up a fan of.
Yeah, it really is a pinch me moment, and it's why this job is so cool, is that you're not that far away from your heroes at any time.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, they're usually not that much older than you are, and for another thing, it's like once you're in the club, more or less, you're treated as an equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I still feel like that 12-year-old that's making my own comics. Even today, I turn 59 tomorrow, but I
Well,
still
happy
feel,
birthday.
thank you. And I still feel like that 12-year-old, like trying to prove himself. But Bernie was so cool, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, you're one of us now. You're one of the guys that drew Swamp Thing. You're here." And it's been that way ever since. Like every time I get a gig, I feel like you said, I'm going to keep going until somebody catches on and takes me away.
Yeah.
Uh, 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 but it's the best thing about this job is that like you can make your dreams come true. You really can.
Mm-hmm. So if for anybody that goes and looks at your run, if they look at the first issue you did and the last issue you did, you could see it, a change in the art style. Was that something that you did intentionally, or is it just kind of how your style evolved, over the couple years that you were working on that?
A little of both. I think I hope that I get better every year as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what really changed was the inker, Kim DeMolder, and I were getting more on the same page.
Okay.
Like when I started, he was very much because he had that job previously when Scott Eaton was the artist.
Mm-hmm.
He was the inker then, and I was like the newcomer. And so like he was still inking it in that sort of kind of Flora John Toddleman, really illustrative style. And I was penciling it in a very like high contrast, pared down style. And so those two things didn't really go together, even though the results were interesting. People wouldn't know that we were clashing because it looked fun and looked cool. But we didn't really start meshing until probably like the last 8 issues of the book, which is a shame. But but still, the result, I think people are still, judging from the sales of the omnibus, which have been really encouraging, like people did dig it.
Yeah. So while you were doing that, you were also working on other books for DC. You were working on stuff for Marvel. You were working on stuff for independent books. Just so how quickly can you draw? I know I've heard some artists, like I guess the general industry standard is about a page a day.
Yeah.
Some do it much faster, some are slower. So what is your pace that you work at where you're able to produce so much?
Well, there's a difference between 29-year-old Phil and 59-year-old Phil. Those are different paces. I think I had a point. I had 1 month in, like when I was drawing Swamp Thing, when I was like, in my mid 20s, where I did 70 pages in a month, and I could never do that now. And every editor I'm working for now is like, "Where's that guy?" But part of the reason I could do that was like, I was much more forgiving of of my own skill set then. Like I was just so excited to be at the show, I would crank and like I was like, here's a new page, and now I'm much more self-critical and I like slow down and go, how can I make this better? I really start to like analyze myself, and that slows me down. I have to admit, and I can see like a lot of times when artists get to my age or older. They slow down not because of physical limitations, but because they are more critical of their own work, and they start to examine it with a more critical eye, and they're less willing to let garbage go out. I'm not saying all the work I did then was garbage. I'm just saying that like I could let it go without a critical appraisal, and now I can't. So now I really have to I have to feel really good about something before I can let it go, which slows me down. So like you said, though, you should be able to hit a page a day. But like in my 20s, I was crazy. I was like killing myself for one thing, like staying up too late. And my kids were little. So I was trying to raise my kid. My wife's a elementary school teacher. So she would be at work and I'd be with the kids at home. And then when they all went to bed, I'd start.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not good for your long-term health, no. To live like that. But my wife being so understanding and having that steady job, it was a real key for me being able to take chances with my comics career.
Mm-hmm. So then I saw in '99 you penciled the one shot, the Clerks, the Lost Scene for Oni Comics. How did you get that project, and had you been a fan of the movie before you got that?
Yeah, I had seen the movie, um, uh, but again, I had little kids at home, so like I was not at the theater like I used to be when I was in college or in my early 20s.
Oh, I
But
have a 7-year-old now, so I
yeah,
I totally understand that. Like, you sneak it in whenever you're able to.
right. And back then you had to like go to the movie theater.
Yeah,
You couldn't stream Clerks. But it goes down to an editor named Bob Schreck, who had been sort of like shepherding my career for a long time. He'd been
hmm
like sort of watching my growth and looking for jobs for me. And he tried to get me work at Kamiko, and he tried to get me work at Dark Horse, all these places where he worked. And then when he wound up at Oni, um, he ran a list of artists by Kevin. He said, "Here's some guys I think I could get." And we'll go back to Swamp Thing. Kevin was a fan of the Swamp Thing run I had with Mark.
hmm
So when my name came up on that list, he recognized it and said, "Yeah, let's go with that guy." So Bob Schreck got me the gig, and we got along. I got along really well with Kevin. I really was in tune with like his dialogue skills, and it helped me, and it challenged me as a storyteller to make sure that all those dialogue beats were hitting at the right time.
yeah.
And I think we did it, and I think that's why. Uh, and Kevin appreciated that, and I think that's what led us to us collaborating so much more in the future.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is then, just a couple years later, you guys, are relaunching the Green Arrow book together when they brought Oliver Queen back to life. Did working with him on Clerks, was that a factor into you getting the job as the artist on Green Arrow when it was relaunched?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it put me in this like well, Bob Schreck again had gone from Oni to DC, and he
hmm
cajoled Kevin into doing Green Arrow, and he gave him a list of guys to work with, and it was all people that Kevin felt comfortable with, because at this time he had done a few comics.
I think
Not
that was after he did Daredevil. I think.
right. It was
Yeah.
after he did Daredevil. So like I think his first instinct was to get Joe Quesada to come
hmm
over and do Green Arrow, but Joe got this other job about then,
Yeah.
running Marvel Comics, and so like he couldn't come over and work for DC,
It's
and
like
so
I can't run Marvel while I'm also
yeah,
the artist on a DC book.
true. It looked weird, and it's sort of like it sort of bumped me up the list a little bit, and
hmm
so but Kevin was comfortable with me doing. Bob Schreck was comfortable with me doing it. DC wasn't.
Oh.
DC saw me as a Vertigo guy,
hmm
or an indie, like kind of a tweener, like a more like a Dark Horse kind of artist, and they didn't see me on like their mainline superhero books. But Bob Schreck went to bat for me, and I had drawn a couple issues of Detective before this, also like a couple fill-in issues of Detective during the Greg Rucka, Sean Martin Burr run,
hmm
and they showed him that, and they said, "No, this guy can do DCU stuff. Give him a shot." And they went to bat for me, and thankfully it paid off, and that gig really changed my life.
Yeah, you had a good long run on it.
Yeah, Andy Parks and I did that for 4 years. Yeah.
Uh, when you were doing it, you helped co-create some new characters that were long-term Green Arrow characters, and Mia Dearden and the villain Onomatopoeia, which just such a bizarre but cool
Yeah.
idea for a villain. So what went into the creation of these new characters?
They arose strictly from the storyline. So it was
Mhm.
just like, as Kevin wrote, if he felt like there was room for that character, if that character would be either a good sounding board for Green Arrow or a good counterpart to Green Arrow, uh, it would just rise out of the story naturally. I think Onomatopoeia was the only one that was sort of living in Kevin's head for a while before he got him actually out into the comic book. And it's been really cool to see that character have like a second life outside of Green Arrow,
Yeah.
and to work its way into the Superman TV show or the Batman cartoon. It's all been really neat. And I think it's largely down to like his gimmick is really cool and his look is very simple but striking.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a lot of fun to create that character. And I got to go back to him just recently, and the new Josh Williamson's new Green Arrow run
Yeah.
had a one shot that had well, not a one shot, kind of a standalone story that had onomatopoeia in it. And I was lucky to get to come back and draw that.
What about the character Mia? She was for not so much now, but for a long time she was a very integral part of the Green Arrow book, and had a real big story arc, and some really kind of touching moments, and
Yeah.
some real serious issues that were dealt with her.
Yeah, and it outlasted the Kevin run and into Judd Winnick's run, through Brad Meltzer's as well. But like, I think that was like Kevin's gift for dialogue is also a gift for like smart asses.
Yeah.
Like he loves smart asses, and he really wanted to get a smart ass in there to be like the foil for Ollie being the straight arrow, more or less superhero. Yeah. And so Mia had to get into that book. And then when we developed Mia's backstory, that she had been like kind of an exploited, trafficked sex worker, that there would be consequences to that. And like HIV might be an unfortunate result of that. And so that seemed like a natural thing to play out. And then Judd, who has such an awareness about HIV and AIDS issues, put those two things together, put the past that Kevin built for together with the natural consequences of that, but then also showed that you can like sort of, you can live with that. It's not a death sentence. You can still be your bright, happy, like superhero kind of character. And that's what she became for a while. And it's one of those weird things where like I designed this costume for her, and then like only got to draw it like on 2 or 3 pages before I was done, because that was my last issue. But it felt good to be like sort of on the edge of that like sort of important topic, especially at that time.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the other writers. Kevin did his run, then Brad Meltzer took over with issue 16. Scott Beatty wrote issue 22. Judd Winnick took over with issue 26. But you stayed through all these different artists. So what was it like where you're on the same book with the same character, but all these other different writers are coming in? Was it what was the differences between them and working with each of them?
Yeah, they each brought their own skill set to the book, and I learned a bunch from all of them. As a writer myself, I learned a ton from working with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it was especially to see Brad come on and to be like, even at that time, he was already an acclaimed novelist, even though he was a younger guy. He was still like well-respected mainstream novelist. But to see him come in and sort of build a plot the way you would build a plot in a like a thriller, almost a thriller novel, that he's the kind of books that he writes, to see him build that in a comic book, but do it without sacrificing any lore, and in fact sort of reveling in the lore. He would like, he's a huge nerd. He's a bigger nerd than I am.
Oh yeah.
Like in the scripts, he would like say, well, Phil, this is last time we saw this was in Justice League number 59 in the year it came out. And I'm like, dude, I read these comics too, and I do not know. I don't know issue numbers, but he knows issue numbers. And but he would like do all these like intentional callbacks to Green Arrow's past. And I think the coolest thing he did, beside all the emotional weight that book had when he took it on, was he did a good job of like, Kevin's run is very much like, hey, Green Arrow's back. Here's Green Arrow.
Yeah.
And Brad was very much like, hey, we know Green Arrow's back, but we're going to tie him back into his history with the Archer's Quest. And he sort of rebuilt the Arrow family around Ollie, which was really cool. And then he handed it off to Judd, and Judd was very much like, okay, it's time for us to make him a player in the DCU and get back to like, Ollie the superhero.
Yeah.
But he also spent a lot more time like developing Ollie's like civilian life, and his love life and things like that, and of course Mia, of course, and all the sort of the family dynamics that came with the Arrow family. So they all had different skill sets, and they were all like really brilliant to work with, and I'm so lucky to get to work with all of them.
Then
even though Brad and Judd are Wolverines.
In 2006, you were doing 2 books. You were doing Nightwing for DC. You're doing Marvel Team Up for Marvel. What was it like working on 2 books for the the big 2, and especially because you mentioned earlier that you were a big fan of Marvel Team Up when you were growing up. Was that a pretty big throw for you then? Be like, I'm getting to do this book, that I was a fan of then, get to put your stamp on it.
Oh, for sure. Well, actually, when I was working on Ultimate Marvel Team Up was during Green Arrow, actually.
Okay.
And so it was like
or Ultimate Marvel TV,
yeah, Ultimate Marvel Team Up was coming out at the same time like our early Green Arrow books were coming out. So, like through no like fault of mine or no credit of mine, I had like 2 books in the top 5 at one time. Between Ultimate Team Up but that was largely due to Brian Bendis. I knew Bendis from when we were coming up at Caliber together, and he had really blown up at Marvel and had been the architect behind this Ultimate line and wanted me to come in and help out with that. So it was like, I love Spider-Man. I love Team Up. So it was a blast to get to do that. And then later when I was doing Nightwing, I was doing covers on Team Up.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew the Nightwing run was coming to an end, and Kirkman, Robert Kirkman, who I'd also known since he was young, was like, come over here and do Ant-Man with me. But Ant-Man wasn't quite ready to come out yet, so he's like, we'll get you warmed up by doing some covers. So I had a cover run of Team Up before Ant-Man started.
All right. Oh, that was the other one I was going to ask you is, how you two launched the new Ant-Man, but it wasn't, the irredeemable Ant-Man, but it wasn't like, oh, here's Hank Pym or here's Scott Lang, that you created a new Ant-Man, Eric O'Grady, who's completely different from them. So what is it that, that went into the creation of this new character, the costume design?
Yeah. So that was largely, that was Robert, like, they were saying, look, here's a character that we don't care that much about, that you can do whatever you want to, and Robert was sort of like, well, let's just start over from scratch. Let's just new look. And let's do a character that, anybody that's a fan of Invincible knows what's special about Invincible is it has all these like the visible, recognizable tropes of a superhero comic, but it subverts all of them, and it presents a realistic, like, what would it really be like for a teenager to have the powers of Superboy, and that's sort of like the approach we took with Ant-Man. What would it be like if somebody became a superhero who wasn't just an everyman, but was like below average? Like, that scene where like in the Lee and Ditko Spider-Man, when he's buried under all those pipes and he like pushes himself off and he's like, I can do it, Eric O'Grady would be like, screw it. Like, let the pipes crush him. And that's sort of, we wanted to explore what it would be like for somebody that was really unremarkable to be thrust into all these remarkable situations. And I thought that book was like ahead of its time. I think if it had come out even like 8 years later, it would have been like, it would have fit into that sort of Deadpool Squirrel Girl kind of dynamic of like offbeat heroes. But at the time it came out, like, comics were so addicted to being like so super dark and overly serious, and like there wasn't room for a character like Eric O'Grady. But we had a blast working on it, and some of the concepts we created wound up in the films, which was cool. But yeah, and I got a chance to work with Robert, which was a lot of fun because, like I said, I've known Robert since he was really young, and it was fun to watch him sort of come up like with Battle Pope and then just sort of like work his way up to be like a real force of nature in comics.
Yeah. And you mentioned Caliber. There was one book I saw, was it Negative Burn, that
Yeah.
you worked on first. It's an anthology book. For anyone that doesn't know, and it was first at Caliber, and then it was at Image, and you worked on it a lot. So was there any difference working on it when it was at Caliber than when it was at Image?
No, because Joe Pruitt was the guiding force behind it both places.
Uh-huh.
And so as long as Joe was the guiding hand editorially, it was going to have the same character. And what was cool about it was like the 90s was a really great time for these black and white and sometimes color anthologies to get started. And there was a lot more room in the marketplace for anthologies. And if you had a short story idea, you could sell it. Like I could sell it to Taboo or Deadline or Dark Horse Presents or Negative Burn. And now I don't know if there's such a ready place for that sort of storytelling, but it's where I really developed my skills as storyteller. And if it weren't for Negative Burn and Taboo and places like that, I don't know if I'd be the creator I was today. But yeah, it's also where the first places that let me write also. And so I really sort of cut my teeth as a writer on those short stories.
Now, in comics, you've known as an artist, but yeah, like you mentioned, you worked as a writer, and I saw in some books you worked as a writer, but you would be working from plots or from outlines that were done by other creators. What's it like having someone else come in and say, all right, well, here's what I've laid out,
Yeah.
take it and go write it?
Yeah, I really only done that a couple times. I've done it with Kevin on Green Hornet and Bionic Man, and then I did it with JMS on Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
and in the instance of Wonder Woman, it wasn't so much getting handed a pre-constructed plot as handed a situation where he sort of like ran us up to a certain point in the plot and then was gone, and I had to like sort of deal with the stuff he had already built,
yeah,
to make it make sense. So it wasn't as collaborative as you might make it sound. It was more like I was taking over in a specific set of circumstances that he had created. But with Kevin on Bionic Man and Green Hornet, it was largely working from his screenplays and adapting them for comics and turning them into functioning comic books. And then after that, I stayed on those books after adapting Kevin's screenplays and actually writing those books in his world. So it was those Kevin Smith continuities that continued, but I stayed on and wrote them for Bionic Man, I think for like 4 or 5 issues. And then for Green Hornet, I feel like 10 or 12 issues. But yeah.
And those are older classic characters. Were they characters that you were a fan of before working on those projects? Or like when you were working on Godzilla, was that something where you were a fan of it before you were actually doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little nerdy kid, so like I was into all that stuff. If it was a superhero or science fiction or fantasy, like I was into it. But I wasn't like particularly fond of Green Hornet. Like when I saw Green Hornet, I thought, oh, that's just Batman, not knowing they had a natural, like, they influenced each other. But and same with Bionic Man, like, even though that show was coming out when I was a kid, I didn't like, for me, like Bionic Man was weak sauce compared to like Spider-Man. Like I'd rather read about Conan than watch $6 Million Man. But yeah, it was easy to get into all those characters. Also because Kevin had really updated those concepts in his screenplays and made them a little more relevant to the modern time.
And another thing that kind of ties into it, in 2014, you did the Flash Season 0 book that tied into the CW show. So, was there anything different on working with that than another comic where you're not just doing the comic, but it's tied into this other media property?
Yeah, they all. I mean, every gig you have has different challenges. to us, the big challenge on that book was we had to work on it before the show was out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also before any footage, when all footage of the show was embargoed. So we had only seen like stills from the set, like a few, like almost like, almost like UFO photos from the set. So we had to like piece everything together from that when we were drawing it. And then when the show came out, it was like a big hit. The book really took off, and people were buying. Like every time I came to a convention, I signed a bunch of those because like when you put Grant Gustin's face on the cover, you're going to sell a lot of them.
Yeah.
And we were selling a lot of that book, but it was a lot of fun also because the editor of that book let us like take some chances, and like he let us write a few issues also. And he let my inker Eric Gapster draw an issue solo as well, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, it was fun to do a Flash comic that wasn't bogged down in DC continuity.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like a simpler Flash comic because we weren't worried about like, oh, how does this tie into whatever giant crossover is going on right now?
Yeah.
He was in his own like universe.
What was I going to ask? Oh yeah, you worked for so many years doing Green Arrow. Then recently, you had mentioned Williamson's run that you came back and were working on Green Arrow again some too. So what was it? Was it any different coming back and working on it now than when you did it before?
Oh, for sure. Well, it's 20 years later, so I'm a different artist for one thing. But also like the character's costume is new. The supporting cast is different. Josh writes differently than Kevin or Judd or Brad did. So yeah, it was fun to kind of come home again, especially since Josh knew I was coming back and he set up certain scenes so I could draw classic Green Arrow in places, which was a lot of fun. But mostly I was just helping out on that book, because it had a life of its own and a momentum of its own. And Josh was really like an expert at sort of integrating fill-ins and like fill-in scenes in ways that make sense, so it doesn't feel intrusive that I'm in there doing an issue.
Yeah,
taking over from the regular guy.
Well, I mean, as a fan, and a fan when you did the first run, and then on this one, and not knowing that you were coming back, just reading it and then getting a new issue, like, oh man, Phil Hester's back, like that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun, and it sort of made me feel old, because like, I run into people now who are like, oh, this comic got me back into comics, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, and I look up and they've got white hair. That's weird.
Well, I know the book that you have coming out now from Dark Horse, make sure I say this right, The Adventures of Lumen N.
Yes.
That you're doing with James Robinson. So what went into the creation of that book?
So for a long time, James has been like sort of like, this is another pinch me moment, because like I'm a huge fan of James and everything he's created, and he has really, really good taste in artistic collaborators. So when he sort of like a few years ago, he sort of like started sniffing around saying, hey, if you're available, I'd like to collaborate on something. And that's like a real, like another pinch me moment, because like he's created so many fantastic books.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh yeah, if it's the right thing, let's do it. And then he kept sending me idea after idea. And then the one that finally like clicked with me was Lumen. We just call it Lumen as we're working on it. We don't do all the giant title, but it just seemed like a really, like, I'm a huge fan of, if I don't know if you remember Leave It to Chance, which was he did with Paul Smith. And it's very much in the flavor of that. It's like, it's an all ages book, but like told in a sophisticated enough way that like anybody could get into it. And it's very like action heavy and propulsive. So like it's okay. It's like okay for younger readers, but we're not like talking down to younger readers.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. And we're sort of playing with that sort of dawn of science fiction concepts from like H.G. Wells or Jules Verne or Arthur Conan Doyle, all those sort of writers that were sort of, you know, Victorian Edwardian eras, like strange fiction authors.
Yeah.
And we're kind of like throwing this young girl in like headfirst into that world. So she's seeing all those things like, you know, like the Nautilus submarine or, airships with like, steam powered Gatling guns and things like that. Robotic elephants, things like, all this stuff that's just sort of like from that classic era. And it's just sort of like, we're seeing it through the eyes of this kid, a really remarkable kid, but it's been really fun to do something that's not like specifically noirish or horror related. I mean, still my style is still there. It's still going to sort of, bend toward that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But to do an all ages book is something I really wanted to get back to.
So, without giving anything away, it runs 4 issues. When the 4 issues are done, is there a plan or a possibility that you guys will come back and do something else with it, like another miniseries or something else later?
Yeah, I think once you read it, it'll be clear to people that it's meant to be sort of follow that Hellboy model of like
A series of miniseries.
Yeah, when there's new series, we come back and tell the stories in like even maybe one shots once in a while too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a world that we can come back to whenever we want. And James's wheels are always turning, so he always has new ideas of what to do with those characters.
Nice.
So the last page of the last issue, you'll see it basically starts the next issue.
Awesome. So you mentioned the different genres, that you've worked in a lot of stuff, sci-fi and horror and noir and superhero. Do you have any one that you prefer working in as opposed to another? And what are the differences, or are there any differences between working on them?
Yeah, I mean, naturally you alter your style a little bit depending on the assignment. I think with Lumen, I would sort of lean back in toward my animation style a little bit. That Joe Staten influence, I let kind of out a little bit more. That little John Byrne a little bit more. But it just depends on the gig. And I think my natural bent is probably, as a writer, it's definitely toward horror. And as an artist, I think it's like we talked about at the very beginning of the interview, like superhero stuff, but weird, like that's sort of like my bread and butter. Like if there were a creeper, like a regular creeper book, I'm your guy. A regular Ragman book, I'm there. That stuff that's sort of just kind of offbeat, but still in the world of superheroes, that's sort of where I fit.
Nice. Yeah, I find, at least like I said, when I'm drawing stuff, when you're doing superhero stuff, it's like, all right, I got to make sure the proportions are right, anatomy is right. This, as opposed to if I'm drawing something kind of horror-ish, like, all right, I don't have to restrict myself to that. I can, this arm can be a little bit longer, like, the proportions kind of be weirder. You can, it's better if it is.
Yeah, if it's better if you push it, you exaggerate, or you push it into grotesquerie. That's welcome. And yeah, I would say probably my favorite genre, both as a reader and as an artist, are monsters that are good guys. That's what I love to draw. I love to draw, like Swamp Thing. A monster is a good guy. Man Thing, a monster is a good guy. The Hulk, all that sort of stuff is where my natural inclinations are.
So when Lumen is wrapped up, do you have anything else that's going to be coming out soon?
Yeah. Well, not too far from now, there will be a collection of all the G.I. Joe silent issues that came out this summer. And I wrote and drew one of those that I'm really proud of, starring Beachhead. And so the collection will come out this fall. And then early next year, I have a book that I'm just writing at IDW that will be announced, I think, at the New York Comic Con. And then I'm already at work on a couple of series for Ignition Press, the news publisher Ignition Press. One that I'm writing and drawing, one that I'm just just drawing. I mean, just writing. Sorry. And they're both kind of, one's definitely like 100% horror, and one's sort of like apocalyptic drama. And and then, I pick up little assignments from DC here and there and kind of stay busy. And there's a really fun one that I'm working on right now.
So when you're working as a writer and you're writing something that someone else is going to be drawing, or you're writing something that you're going to be drawing, is it different the way you do it? Like,
Yeah.
you write differently for someone else than you do yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So when I'm writing for myself, I'm seeing the panels in my head as I write.
Yeah.
So what I'm basically writing for myself is a radio play. I'm just writing dialogue, very vague stage directions, and then I'm already seeing it simultaneously play out as a comic book. It's really hard to separate out and explain to people what's going on, because it's really organic process.
Yeah.
I'm sort of dreaming the comic book as I write. And so if you saw my notes for a comic book that I was going to draw, it would be like a couple lines of, scribbled dialogue or scribbled scene, and maybe like a couple thumbnailed panels, and then more writing, and then, like a cover image. Like it's all over the place. It's almost like a code that somebody else would have a hard time cracking. But then when I'm writing for somebody else, I'm still doing that process where I see the things. And then it's my job to translate that into either thumbnails that I can hand off to the artist, or into like really concise but descriptive panel descriptions that communicate what I want to get across to the artist without hemming them in, letting them do their thing. Because I've been on the other side of that equation. I've gotten scripts that were too descriptive, and I've gotten scripts that were too terse. And what I'm looking for is something that gives them just enough information to chew on, but doesn't overwhelm them. But at the very beginning, the process is still the same. I'm still dreaming a comic book.
So you worked with a ton of creators, different creators in your career so far. Are there any creators you haven't worked with that you'd really like to?
Oh yeah, tons. But it feels really weird to like name them and like pick them out, but I would say that like the ones that I haven't been able to cross off my list are probably ones that I'm not going to get to, like Frank Miller doesn't need to work with me.
Oh, yeah.
He can draw like I can, but better. But yeah, it's what the most exciting thing about this job is when you wind up collaborating with somebody and you didn't know their game until you started working with them. And then you figure out what they can do and what they're good at, and like how to play to each other's strengths. And that's like one of the most satisfying things about this business. Like ideally, of course, we'd all like to like sit in a room and do a graphic novel by ourselves from beginning to end. That'd be great. But the way this business works, like most of the time you're going to be collaborating with other people. And it's also like the most fun part of the job is like just getting to know somebody else's skill set and talent and exchange ideas with that person. That takes me right back to when I was 12, right back to when I was making comics with my friends, playing off each other's strengths, talking about what would be cool, like that's our whole job, is like thinking, wouldn't it be cool if, and it sounds immature, but it's like, so what? It's fun.
Yeah.
And I get paid to do it, which is awesome. But yeah, like just getting to know somebody on that level, it's so much fun. And it's a really cool way to make like lifelong friends. So there will be people that like I collaborated with 20 years ago and haven't collaborated with since, but I still think of them as my coworker, and I think of them as my friend because we did one project together, decades ago. And that's the best part of this gig is like, 90, maybe even higher. I'd say 90% of the people you work with have become your friends, which is awesome.
So along those lines too, are there any characters that you haven't gotten to work on that you'd really like? Oh man, I'd love a chance to,
I would
with so and so.
like we were talking about earlier in the interview, I'd really like to get my hands on the Doom Patrol at some point as a
Mm-hmm.
writer, artist, or both. Um, I love those oddball characters like Ragman.
Yeah.
I'd love to a crack at drawing that character. I love all the monster characters, Werewolf by Night, Frankenstein Creature Commandos, all that kind of offbeat stuff. Throw any of that out there, and I'm into it. I'm there for it. So, yeah, it's again, uh, as an artist, there's any number of things. As a writer, it's hard for me to say. Doom Patrol for sure, and its sister book, in my opinion, Fantastic Four. But Ryan North is doing everything I'd want to do with Fantastic Four, but better. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I wouldn't mind seeing you do a story for the Spirit.
Oh yeah, I was lucky. Gail Simone and I did a short story, which was a lot of fun, and it was a silent story. We did. Uh, there was no spoken dialogue. Everything was pictograms, which was a lot of fun.
No, I want a whole series.
Yeah, I would love to. I have one in my back pocket that uh, I've been working on for probably 20 years. I have a spirit story I've been working on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that must be a good one, though. You would definitely need to make that then.
Yeah, we'll see.
You need to be like when Barry Windsor Smith did the Weapon X story for Marvel Comics, and he just went off and wrote it and drew it, and then went to him and said, "Hey, I've got this that I did," and they're like, "I guess you better
Yeah.
publish this then."
The one little difference, Dan, is that I'm not Barry Smith.
And so are there any projects that have ever come up that you've been attached to do that for one reason or another ended up not happening?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time, and it was heartbreaking. But you can't dwell on that sort of thing. That's just the breaks of working in comics.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
During the Rachel Pollack run, when Ted McKeever was the artist, I think Ted was building in breaks on that book, and they needed like what was basically a regular fill-in person, and I was lined up to be that person, but the book got canceled before it got to one of my issues, which was kind of a bummer for me because I really would have loved to draw on that.
So are there any things that that got canceled and didn't happen, but that you had already started working on that that you have stuff sitting around for this?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I don't. You know what? The weird thing about this business is you're living in the future so much. Like Lumen's not out yet, but I'm past that already. It's like in the future for everybody else, but for me, it's in the past.
Yeah.
The books I'm writing and drawing right now are going to come out till like spring and summer of next year. So I almost never look backwards. I almost never look back and think, oh, this is the thing I didn't get to do, or the thing that I started that didn't happen. I'm sure there are plenty of them, but none that are like really sticking in my craw.
So there's no like George Perez Justice League Avengers crossover from the 80s where there's 20 pages of this story that are sitting there penciled and
there's nothing. There's no blockbuster sitting in a drawer. Believe me, I wish.
So, you mentioned New York Comic Con. Are you going to be at that con? Do you have any other conventions coming up that you'll be at?
I don't plan to be there. I am. I'll be at Rose City in Portland next week, and then I'll be at a couple weeks after that. I'll be at SuperCon in Sioux Falls, and past that, my mind is a mush. So, like, I'm sure I'm doing cons in November. I can't tell you what they are. But nowadays the con season is year round.
Yeah.
I pretty much have a convention every month, for the foreseeable future. So, and next year I think I'll be getting to the East Coast a couple of times, which will be usually I'm in the Midwest near where I live. But next year I think I'll be doing a couple shows on the East Coast again.
Well,
I should remember that I'm going to do the Original Art Expo in Orlando in February.
Awesome.
Which will be fun because I'm also an original art collector, so it'll be fun to me to be in that sort of marketplace.
Well, as someone that's in Maryland that goes to Baltimore Comic Con every year, would love to see you
Yeah, I'd love to get back to there. I've done it once and I thought it was incredible.
Yeah. Well, if you can make it next year, I'll come up to you and be like, hey, remember me? A year ago, we did an interview together.
I will remember you. As long as you have your Hawkman shirt on.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to see you do a mini series or something with Hawkman too.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So you mentioned that the art expo. So we know that creators always get commissions. What would you say is the strangest or coolest, wildest, however you want to say it, commission request that you've gotten from somebody?
Huh. Well, the weird thing about that is you don't know. Like sometimes you'll hear a commission request and you'll think, I'm going to hit that out of the park. And you don't. And sometimes you get one that you think, oh, that sounds odd. And it turns out to be one of your better commissions.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the best ones I ever did was I'm going to lose my nerd badge for this. I don't remember what's the name of the monster in Return of the Jedi when Luke goes to Jabba's headquarters. And
the Rancor?
Rancor, yeah. So a guy was like, hey, I want you to draw Luke, but I want you to draw Luke fighting the Rancor. And I thought, oh, that's going to be a pain. I got to make Luke look like Mark Hamill. I got to make the monster look on model, all this stuff. And it wound up being one of the best commissions I'd ever done, So you never really know. But almost always the best way to get results is to almost always just let the artist do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But if you have or to go up to them with like a menu and say, here's the characters I'm thinking about having you do. Do you have one of those you prefer? You'll always get cool results.
Yeah, I've got an Avengers jam piece that I've had a couple artists do, and I get them at Baltimore Comic Con, and the ones that I've had added to it, I drew the Captain America on there to start because he's my favorite character,
right.
And I just go to him and hand it to him and say, hey, I'd like you to add an Avenger to this. It can be any Avenger you want, whatever costume that they had,
Cool.
whatever character you want, as long as at some point they were on the Avengers. Other than that, whatever pose you want, whatever costume you want, just have fun with it. And yeah, it's gotten some really cool stuff added to it.
Yeah, I love jam pieces like that. That's a lot of fun. I will say I do have a memorable sketch that I turned down, which was real early in my career. A kid came up to me and he wanted me to draw the Punisher, and I was kind of like, okay, because to me the Punisher's a Spider-Man. I'm so old that he's a Spider-Man villain. Mm-hmm. Punisher's a Spider-Man villain. So I was like, well, he's not my favorite, but okay. And he's like, well, I also wanted you to draw him shooting a guy. And I was like, that doesn't sound great, but okay.
Yeah.
He goes, I want you to draw him shooting a guy who's tied to a chair. And I was like, oh man, I don't know about that. And he's like, well, I want you to draw him shooting a guy who's tied to a chair that looks like my dad. And that's when I said no. Yeah, I don't need to be called to testify later.
Yeah, you go work your issues out with your dad.
Right.
Well, you mentioned that you're going to the art show in February, and for anybody that doesn't know, and I didn't really know until I started looking into this, that you have a large art collection, and I saw that you had posted something on Twitter about it. It is called the Hester problem. Yeah. I can't afford to insure my art collection. I can't afford not to insure my art collection. Yeah. So how big is this art collection that you have? And how have you acquired this stuff? How have you built it over the years?
Well, going to conventions, art dealers used to be a little more prevalent than they are now. Mm-hmm. So like every time you did a big show, there'd be an art dealer there. So if you did speaking as an artist, if you did a bunch of commissions at the show or sold your own pages at the show, you had a bunch of ready cash in hand. You could just walk over to it. Like I could trade like 4 of my pages for a Wally Wood page. I'll do that every day of the week, And so that's sort of how I built my collection, like going to conventions and plying my trade and then turning around and sinking that into the pages that I saw for sale there. But yeah, I have over 500 pieces.
Wow.
And I bought most of them when they were not huge investments, when they
Yeah.
were reasonable or trades. And uh, it's just like, to me, it's like, as much as I love comics, this is like comic collecting plus.
Yeah.
It's a little even more intense form of comic book collecting. And as an artist, that also like teaches me. Like when I see how other people do things, I learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a hobby that I really like. I don't see a bottom to, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think I'm ever going to be fully satisfied. I'm always going to be working to improve my collection.
How much of it do you have on display?
Almost nothing.
Oh,
Almost everything's in flat files because I'm so afraid of stuff fading.
yeah.
Um, you see behind me, I think you can see one thing. There's
Yeah.
that's an Alex Toth storyboard from a series called Space Angel.
Oh, wow.
And then on my other wall, which you can't see, there's a Philippe Drouillet environment from a video game that he worked on. But yeah, almost everything else is in flat files.
So is it a mix of commissions, original pages?
Yeah, mostly almost everything's interior pages because
Mm-hmm.
I like to learn about storytelling. So almost everything's interior pages, a few covers, a few commissions, a lot of prep sketches. I buy thumbnails and layouts a lot too because I like
Yeah.
to learn from those.
So what would you say are some of the cooler, or what you would consider some of the cooler pieces? Like if I were coming over and I said, "Hey, show me some of the stuff in your collection," what would you be like? Oh, you got to see this.
Well, you can
Check this
you
out.
can do that anytime you want. I have a Comic Art Fans gallery under my name, and you can go to Comic Art Fans and just search Phil Hester, and my gallery will come up. And
Okay.
it's all, I mean, that whole website is just people showing off their goods, and like, see what I have. And everybody's got a feature wall. So like when you go to my profile, there'll be a feature wall, and what'll pop up on it are like Frank Miller pages, Joe Shuster, George
Wow.
Harriman, Kirby, Wally Wood,
Oh,
Bruce
wow.
Timm, all sorts of like artists I really admire. And I'm never satisfied with just one. I think at this point I've got like a dozen Kirbys, a dozen Alex Toths, something like 17 Tony Salmon's pages. Yeah, I got a problem.
So, is there anybody that you want stuff from that you don't have yet?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's always stuff. Yeah, it's another it's a bottomless pit because you'll get a grail and you'll think, I made it. I got what I wanted. And
Yeah.
then you'll be like, oh, maybe I want a little bit better example of that. Like I said, I have a dozen Kirby's. I don't have any Kirby Senate Fantastic Four. I
Oh,
really love that.
yeah.
So there's always one more thing around the corner, like pulling at you to come get. So yeah, it's a never ending hobby. Yeah.
So,
I
are
would say
you?
I've got I got two huge grails out there that I'm really looking for. I really like to get a nice Mike Plug Werewolf by Night page.
Oh, yeah.
And then Dick Briefer, who was a Golden Age artist, wrote and drew a book. He wrote and drew Frankenstein forever,
Mm-hmm.
like in the 40s and 50s. He wrote and drew it through two distinct periods, like a horror period and a humor period. And I'd really like to get a page from the horror when he was drawing it as a horror comic.
Well, if you get that, then you'll go, well, I've got this. Now I've got to
Right.
get one from the humor too,
Yeah.
because he did.
I know that's what will happen. Don't peg me so hard, Dan. You know that's what's going to happen.
Well, were you finally able to find a way to get it insured? I know that reading the thread there, it was that the amount of money that it would have taken to appraise it would have been ridiculous, and then
yeah, it would cost. I got a quote to appraise it of $30,000 to appraise it. But yeah, all I could do for the time being was pump up my homeowners to the legal
Yeah.
maximum without being fraudulent, which is what I did.
And I think
But
wasn't there a comment on there where you said where they asked, well, who would be in the area that would be able to appraise this, and you went, me.
yeah,
Who
there's
would
a
be the expert? I would be.
yeah. Although there are a couple people in nearby, a couple hours drive away, but like where I live, yeah, it's probably me.
And you said that you would sell some of your pages. I've done a few interviews. I've talked to some artists that like I did one with Derek Robertson, who said he's got almost everything he's ever done. He said he sold like 2 pages and he's got everything else. And I've talked to others that are like Jim Calafiore. He's like, no, I sell everything. He's like,
Yeah.
so where are you at in that spectrum?
I'm closer to Jim. Like I have a box where I'm keeping probably 30 or 40 pages that I want to keep forever, and everything else is on the chopping block because I realize like I get how fun it is to collect art.
Yeah.
So like I have stuff available at like a huge range. So like, I have $1,000 pages, like really nice cool pages. But then I also have like $50 pages. And that's cool for like people that are just getting into the hobby or just they want a piece of original art but they can't afford something huge and they want to take something home. That's
me. I go to Baltimore every year. I'm like, I'm going to get some original art this year, and I'm looking through. Like, I want to get a page, that I can put up. And I look at the prices. I'm like, oh my god, the only thing I can afford is, if it's a page of like J. Jonah Jameson talking to Robbie Robertson for 9 panels. I'm like, yeah, cool, but
right. No, I get it.
Punching Hobgoblin or something.
Right, I get it. So I try to have a big, and I don't have an art dealer. I do it all myself. So,
and if somebody were interested in that, where would they just contact you through the
Twitter
or Blue Sky? Or
the easiest way is just to see me at a con because I don't have a website yet. Someday I hope to have a website where you could shop for pages. But right now, the only way to really do that is to see me at a con. Or if there's a book out that like really like when Gotham City Year One came out, a lot of people like contacted me and said, "Hey, is this page available?" That's a way to do it. But the easiest way is to just see me at a con.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for taking the time. I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you for taking the time, to talk with me. It's been a blast. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to find him online, check him out on Twitter. Phil Hester, on Blue Sky, Phil Hester, and his Facebook fan page at, you guessed it, Phil Hester.
Yep.
And you can check us out online, thecodexstation.com. It's got links to all of our socials and profiles on all the guys here and links if you want to buy our merch and all that. So, check that out. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and talk with me tonight.
It was my pleasure, Dan. Anytime.
Thank you. And for everyone else, until next time, catch you by the spinner rack.
Hey coders, if you like that, give us a subscribe. And if you want more content like that, definitely check out the videos above. Hope you enjoy it. There's a lot for everyone.